Greetings once again from Santa Rosa here in California. Revelation 14:1 ministry, a ministry that's dedicated to the true Word of God. We greet you once again wherever in the world you will be viewing these videos from. We hope that the message that we will put across will come across to you and help you find new lights in the Bible and the topics that we are studying. Today we will be, our topic is from true to fake Christianity. From true to the fake Christianity. The transition of the true religion down to fake Christianity. And we'll see, we've been talking, the study in the past 2 months has been focusing on our ancestry as Fijians. We've clarified that we all can trace our ancestry back to Noah, and this ministry has focused in on the Fijian, our ancestry, how we can trace them back to the plains of Babel. So together with that, we will have to, today, we look at how Christianity had deteriorated over the years, and how we, at the end, we will link it back to the Fijian ancestry, how these two link together. So we are beginning to open up this study to include the whole global Christian movement right from the Tower of Babel. So from true to the fake Christian era. And we'll start with this verse in Acts chapter 11, verse 26, regarding early Christians. This was right after the death of Jesus Christ, a few years when Paul and the rest of the apostles began to take the word out into the world. And it says, "And when he had found him, he brought him unto Antioch. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch." So that's where the word Christians, the first followers of Jesus Christ, they were called Christians, just like the followers of Buddha, Buddhists, and so on. So the first Christian church was founded there in Antioch by Paul and Barnabas. So Barnabas went out to look for Paul, and he found him, and he brought him back to Antioch, where they began their ministry. And they stayed there for a year and formed this first church in Antioch. So this church was a pure church. They taught everything that Christ had taught in the year or so that he had been living with them. So the story of Jesus was the difference between the Jewish message, or the Judaism, the message of Judaism, and the new Christian church, which now flourished and covered the whole area around Palestine. In Acts chapter 13, 2 chapters later, it reads, chapter 13, verses 42 to 43. And when the Jews were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. So there are two people that we are talking about here. First, the Jews whose religion was Judaism. They go to synagogues. They worship Jehovah God. But then these Gentiles, anyone who was not a Jew was a Gentile. And you see that they have started to come together to worship the same God that the Jews worshipped. But in this case, you see what happened. It says that the Jews, after the church service on that day, the Jews left the synagogue. The Gentiles remained in there. And what did they do? They asked Paul and Barnabas that next Sabbath we want to hear some messages that are similar to what they've just heard on that Sabbath. So they were very much interested. So you see, they've been going to that church, that synagogue, for ages now. They were hearing the same boring message. But when Paul and Barnabas stood up there and preached, they waited for the Jews to go out, and they asked Paul and Barnabas, please, we want to hear from you guys again next Sabbath. So you see, even after Jesus had died, they were still worshipping on the seventh day Sabbath, like it is said here. Next Sabbath, see, they have identified the day. The next Sabbath, if we will come here, we want to hear from you again. Verse 43 says, now when the congregation was broken up, many of the Jews and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of God. Even though the church leaders have gone, this verse says that some Jews and some proselytes, those who have converted into the new faith, stayed back with the Gentiles. And this is what they told Paul and Barnabas. They wanted them to continue in the grace of God. So they know that these two men are not ordinary men. Why? Because the message that they are taking is different. That's how you identify a true Christian. These people are tired of the boring message they hear in church every day. They don't want to hear that anymore. That's why they waited. Let the church leaders move out of the church. Then they spoke to Paul privately. We want to hear more messages like this. The message that will move our hearts. Every Sabbath we come and sit down here and hear the same boring message. Love, love, love. All this peace. You seem to have a different message that interests my heart. So that's what should be the kind of message that we share to our friends and relatives, the ones that will move their hearts, just like what Paul and Barnabas are doing here in Antioch. When did the Sabbath change? So you see, the true Christians of the early Christian era, they still worshipped on the seventh day Sabbath. Unlike what is taught today. They say that they did not worship on the seventh day. They worshipped on the resurrection day. That's what we are taught today. We are worshipping on the first day of the week because Jesus rose from the dead. You see, Paul and Barnabas and all these Gentiles, the proselytes, the Jews, were still worshipping on the seventh day Sabbath. That false teaching which came from Rome should not be allowed to continue. So you see, in these last days, this will be the issue. That's why we keep bringing up the fourth commandment This is written on stones and it won't change. They say that this is obsolete. You still don't worship other gods. You still don't kill. Still don't. But only this part here is obsolete. We'll find out as we continue this study that even these people, Paul and Barnabas and all their followers, they worship on the Sabbath. They kept the fourth commandment. Let's move on. So the identifying, we haven't read Daniel 7. When did the Sabbath change? Daniel 7 says, 25. And he's referring to someone, a person, shall speak great words against the Most High, against Jesus, against the Creator, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. They will persecute the Christians. They will persecute the people who are true to God. And they will think to change times. So the question is, when was the Sabbath? When did the Sabbath change? We see in Daniel lived about 400 years before Christ. He's talking about someone in the future. And he's saying this man will speak badly about the Most High, about God. He will persecute the godly people. And he will change times and laws. Remember the law? And they shall be given unto his hands until a time and times and a dividing of times. So we see, now we are realizing that the Bible itself predicts the change which will happen in the future. This is Daniel, 400 years before Christ. Now it was after Christ, Paul and Barnabas, they are still worshipping on the Sabbath day. So that just confirms to us that Jesus rising out of the grave, his resurrection, was not the real reason for changing the day of worship. If you hear that in your church, get out of the church. They are telling you that's a false teaching that started off from Rome. So he will change times and he will change the law. We know this law is written in stone and it won't change. The author wrote it on stone. Someone else changed it, and this Daniel 7 says, who will change it? This guy here. We have to identify that. So the identifying marks of that Daniel 7. What he will do, he will persecute the people of God or the Christians. He will change the times. He will change the laws. We've all identified this from that verse, Daniel 7. And the fourth is he will rule for 3.5 times, or 360 years times 3.5, 3.5, which is equal to 1,260 years. With the detail about that, we will go study that in more detail in another topic. But this is where what is it trying to tell us? This person, that he who will persecute the Christians, he will rule the whole world. For how long? 1,260 years. He will change the times, he will change the laws, and he will persecute Christians. Who did that? It points to none other than the papal system of Rome. So we're beginning to focus now. How did we come to that conclusion? Let's see. First point, This is only 4 points that will help us identify who this power is. During the Middle Ages, the pontiff or the pope persecuted and hunted Christians like wild animals all over Europe. There's books and there's records of what happened during the Middle Ages. We study it in history, in our school days. In history we study about the Dark Ages. We study about the Reformation. This all happened in history and it's well documented. So during this time, we found out that when the Pope of Rome ruled over Europe, this is exactly what he did. He hunted the Christians down like wild animals. They have to run into the bushes. They have to run into the hills, into the mountains to hide from the military. Point number 2, it says, this power changed the godly timing of the seventh-day Sabbath to the first-day Sabbath. Remember, Paul and Barnabas and all their followers, they were still worshipping on the seventh-day Sabbath. They counted 1, 2, 3, 7, oh, this is the Sabbath day, and then continued. So that was how they were identified as the true Christians. They followed what Jesus did. Jesus was their example. Jesus kept the seventh-day Sabbath, so they did likewise. So this power changed it. And when did that happen? History will answer that too for us. 336 AD, Paul and Barnabas were living in the first 100 years of Christianity. 200 years later, when Constantine, Emperor Constantine of Rome, became a Christian, he joined the church. And what happened? When a big person comes into the church, what did they do? They gave him all the power in the church, even though he was half converted. And he was a politician. So what he wanted to do is invite all the sun worshippers. So what he did is he changed the law a little. Changed this very law. Instead of following what God wanted, the 6th, 7th day, he changed, say, we can worship on the first day of the week, so that those people who are worshiping the sun can come and worship with us. So the churches began to fill up. First, because they wanted to come and please the emperor who's now become a Christian. Secondly, they wanted to follow his law because he changed this law. That's what the weakness that we face to today. Just because our leaders change the laws, even though it is ungodly, even though it's unbiblical, because they are our leaders, we follow blindly. We accept what they've done. Just like what Constantine did. And the people during that time, 300 years after Jesus, they followed blindly without referring to this very law here. They followed all the other laws. They did not kill, they stopped killing, no adultery and all these laws. But for this, because Emperor Constantine wanted this day changed, they changed it there. That's the problem. That's when the change was made. And point number 3, it changed God's 10 laws by removing the 2nd commandment on idol worship, changed the 4th law of Sabbath, and splitting the 10th commandment into 2 to replace the 2nd commandment. So the 2nd commandment talks about graven image. Because this new church is into this, they worship graven images. They removed all this command, this total command. Remove that. So now we're only left with 9 commandments. The second thing they did, change this 4th commandment. Because they don't want the 7th-day Sabbath, they want the 1st-day Sabbath. This was changed. This removed, this changed. So there's still 9. So what they did, this last commandment here, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, and his manservant, nor his maidservant. They divided this into 2 commandments. So they made it 10 again. You see how the devil works things out? And when we are blind, and when we are following without thinking, we fall into the trap. That's exactly what happened. And now we realize, oh, we changed the Sabbath because Jesus was resurrected on the Sabbath. This is the real stuff that I'm talking about. Dig into the history of this world, or during this period, and you'll find out what happened. The last point that we want to say here, that it ruled from 538 AD to 1798 AD. That was when this power ruled, and it fitted exactly into the 1,260 days that we worked out in the last slide. If you just look through here, this last point number 4, it ruled for 360 times 3.5, gives us 1,260. In here it says, it ruled from 538 AD to 1798. Exactly as God had predicted, right back from the time of Daniel. 400 years before Christ was born, Daniel had already been informed. God foresees the future. Daniel didn't have a clue what he was writing about. But God told him, write this. Why? Because this message is for those people right at the end time. You and me. No other power in history exactly fits this description. So all this we have here is from history. In 538 AD, Emperor Justinian of Rome gave the pontiff of Rome then the civil power to rule over the people. It already had religious power over the people. So the Pope of Rome during that time already has the religious power. He was the head of the Catholic Church. Because the state was not in control, the church was getting more and more powerful. The people of the lands were listening more to the church leaders instead of the state leaders. So what Justinian did is he gave them the civic power as well. So now the papal system of Rome had both the religious and the civil powers. So that was when persecution of Christianity also started, 538 AD. And it continued until 1798, the point number 2 here. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte, that was 1,260 years later, was this man from France, Napoleon Bonaparte. He sent his general Berthier to Rome to stop the papal power, which was hindering his expansion of his empire over Europe. This brought an end to the papal system, then rule after exactly 1,260 years in power. So that power of the papal system was broken in 1798, exactly 1,260 years since 538 AD. The Bible had already predicted. God had already foreseen the future and has told Daniel to record it in his books. This is what happened. This map will help us see what. Right here is Rome. You see, this is Italy. Rome is right there. And during this time, it was controlled the whole of Europe, all of this area. The power that was here, they had to move away from here, and they went down to Constantinople, Turkey. So they moved the power, and because of the persecution of Christians in Rome and all of Europe here, they moved together with them to the Eastern. You hear of the Eastern Orthodox Christianity. That was during this time. Rome was getting powerful, and Rome persecuted the Christians. The civil power gave the power to Rome and moved their headquarters to Constantinople. Together with that went the Christians, and they took the Bible. The version of the true Bible was saved because of what happened here. They were persecuted in Western Europe. So what they did, they went together with the power to Eastern Europe, where the Bible version, the pure Bible version, was saved. That's a big story. You have to follow how the Bible was preserved during that time, because Rome was burning all the Bibles. So they took some of the Bibles and ran away with it to save it in the Eastern Church, or the Eastern Orthodox Christian Church. So you see this, Rome, who hated the Bible, hated the law, hated God, and hated Christians, ruled over all of Western Europe. East, it was called the Byzantine, if you study history, the Byzantine Empire. So it ruled in that area. They couldn't have control in this area because the Pope was too powerful. We said, okay, you can have that part. We will run away here. And together with them went the Christians, those who wanted to keep their worshipping God. So that you have to study that map in more detail to get a clear picture of what happened during that time. So during the Dark Ages, only the priests and the upper classes were literate. How did that happen? Because they were the only ones that went to universities. They were the only ones who were educated. So they were the only one who can read. That's why it's called the Dark Ages, because the general population was in the dark. No one knows how to read. So education, people were not able to think. No, very little advance in technology and other areas during this time because of the church. The Church of Rome did not allow the expansion of knowledge in its population. During this time, Christianity was suppressed, and the fake Christianity. Remember who used that word fake in calling the new religion? Alberto Rivera. When he looked back at Catholic history, he turned it that this was the fake religion. We had the pure religion that was spread by the apostles, Paul and Barnabas, as we were reading those verses. That was the pure religion. But then Satan came up with this fake Christian religion. They used the Bible, but they converted it, all the words in there, to suit their teachings. I have a copy of that Bible here with me, but you'll see the big difference they changed the words, and it means completely different. So this happened during that time. Pure version of the Bible were burnt and smuggled off to the east, where it was safeguarded by the Eastern Orthodox Christians. The Western Bible version was totally corrupted by the Roman Church. So the church, the Bible that existed in the West, in Western Europe, was all the Bible that was given out by the Catholic Church. It was all corrupted. But the pure Bible, which we have a copy of now, was preserved in the East. In 1517 AD, Martin Luther began the Protestant movement, and snippets of the pure version were smuggled back to the true Christians of the West. You know, you read about the Reformation period, started off during in 1517 by Martin Luther. You read of stories, amazing stories, of how the true Christians brought back the true version of the Bible from the East back to the West. And they had to hide, they had to disguise themselves. They wrote it in their clothes. And when they came, they started spreading the word, they opened up their shirt. You'll read of stories that are amazing. This was because of the power of the Roman Church. They persecuted anyone who was found with the Bible. So, during Martin Luther's time, Martin Luther found a copy of the real Bible. That's how he started the Reformation. Because now he was reading a copy of the true Bible. This is what happened in the fake. You look at this image here, this idol. This was previously an image of Apollo, the god, the Roman god Apollo. When this fake Christianity, like Alberto Rivera talks about, came into being during that dark ages, they rebaptized Apollo and made him Saint Peter, the founder. They claimed that Peter was the founder of the the Catholic Church. So Apollo became Saint Peter, and this idol sits there right there in the Vatican of Rome. I've been to Rome, and that toe, see that toe, that lady is holding on to the right toe of Apollo. Every Catholic who comes by there kisses that toe. And you see, this is made of iron. If you look, zoom into that picture, you see that that right toe has faded because of the millions of people who come there. They say that Saint Peter will protect you on your travels, because everyone who comes there are pilgrims. So during their travel, Saint Peter will protect them. And he will only protect them if you go and kiss his toe while passing through the Vatican. So that's why that lady is about to kiss the toe there. Millions and millions of Catholics pass by there and kiss Apollo's toe. So see, that's a fake Christianity that Alberto Rivera talks about. Rebaptizing the idols that's spoken about in this second commandment to something that is biblical. Peter, the apostle of Jesus. Reformation period from 1517 AD and beyond. So when Martin Luther started off the Reformation in 1517 AD, that was a gradual, slow return to the original from the fake Christianity. From Paul's day, after the apostolic era, it began to deteriorate. Now it's fake Christianity. 1517, when Martin Luther read that true version of the Bible, he began this Reformation movement. And slowly, people began to study the new Bible, the original Bible, and saw the light, and realized that the Catholic Church had been the cause of all this confusion. Some doctrines like infant baptism was changed back to baptism by immersion. That was the Catholic teaching. Before, they baptized people by immersing them in water. During this dark period, they just sprinkle your baby with water, holy water or whatever they call it, and he's baptized. So, see, from that time onwards, the true teachings of the Bible began to resurface. Translation of the Bible from Latin to common man's language. During that time, it was all the Bibles that were available were written in Latin. Why? So that only educated, only those people of high classes who learn to read in Latin will be able to translate the Bible. You see, only the priests were able to do that. Then they started translating it back to common man's language. And also the replacement of the corrupted Western Bible with the Eastern version. They went and started bringing in this, the true Bible versions of the East, and brought it back. And also came together with it the Sabbath issue. Remember, we started off with the Sabbath. They begin to study the Sabbath, and they find out that the real Sabbath, which had been downtrodden by the Roman Catholic Church, was the seventh-day Sabbath, as written here in the fourth commandment. Meanwhile, back in Fiji, let's get back to our exciting topic of our Fijian ancestry. I find it exciting because I am Fijian. It has been 4,000 years since the arrival of the descendants of Javan. 4,000 years. Right at the plains of Babel, when Javan and his descendants were told, go to those islands far away. You go and occupy those islands so that you may be able to worship me freely. That was 4,000 years ago. 2,800 years, another 1,200 years later, there was the dispersion from Jerusalem. We've already studied this in past studies. If this is new to you, just look back at one of our past YouTube videos. When there was problem in Jerusalem. Why? People were beginning to worship idols again. So they worshiped these idols. But what happened? Those who wanted to worship God, the true God, they had to leave Jerusalem. And when they left Jerusalem, what did God tell them? Go. There's this group of people who left 1,000 years ago from the Babel, plains of Babel. They are in the islands far away. Go and look for them. That's where you can live together with them, because they are worshiping me. That's why the second landing in Fiji happened. When they came in, they saw that they were already, the island was already inhabited by the first, by Javan's descendants. And another 200 years after that, the arrival of the 10 tribes who escaped from Assyria. The northern kingdom of Israel, they were so much into paganism, so much into worshipping of idols, that God allowed the Assyrians to come down and wipe them off and took them prisoners. But amongst them were true worshippers of God. They had to suffer together with the unbelievers. But when they were there, their minds were working, because they were always finding out why God allowed this to happen. Then they found out that the descendants of Javan were coming back from those isles far away to trade in Tyre. So they were close to Tyre. They went from Assyria, where they were slaves to the Assyrian people, and they went over to Tyre. They met up with the descendants of Javan, who came in as traders. Remember, they were traders, they were business people. And they went with them back to those islands far away. That's the third landing back in Fiji. Identifying marks, two identifying marks. If you read in Isaiah 66, it says that I will give them a sign. Even though some of our ancestors have deteriorated, like the Israelites, to paganism and idol worship, some, like the original Exodus purpose, kept the worship of the true God. So, the same thing happened in Fiji. There were people, some of the people started looking away from the God that they came to serve. So they ended up in paganism. Though everyone was circumcised. Remember, the second landing were people who were Jews that ran away from Jerusalem. They came in with the teaching of circumcision for the descendants of Abraham. That was taken up by all those who were in Fiji then. So everyone was circumcised. That's what the American ambassador to Fiji in 1743, I think, when he came, he saw all the boys that were running around. They were already circumcised. And he said, these people are like the Jews of Israel. So that teaching was taken up by all during that time. So though everyone was circumcised, only the true believers kept the other identifier. And what was the other identifier? The first one was circumcision. The second one, which originally came from the plains of Shinar, those who came from Jerusalem had that mark as well. And the true worshippers that went up in Assyria, the 10 tribes, they also worshipped on the seventh day. That was the other mark that they brought along with them. And that identified them as true worshippers of their God, Jehovah, the seventh-day Sabbath. Circumcision, even though it's a mark of a descendant of Abraham, wasn't the real identity of true worship of God. But the true worship of God was identified by the day of worship that they worshipped Him. So the end time, the time of the end, in Daniel 12, verse 4, it says, Be thou, Daniel. You remember we talked about Daniel 7? And he was recording all that he was told. But here, in Daniel 12, it says, You, Daniel, that whatever you've recorded, shut the book up. Close it. Close the book. Seal the book. Even to the time of the end. Why should you close it? Because it won't be good. It's no use for people who live here now and all those people who will live during the Dark Ages. It's no use for them. it will only be useful to the people at the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Two things: the movement of the people and knowledge will increase. That identifies the time of the end. So in 1833, back in Fiji, this is our last slide. There is a clash of different faiths. The white man came, 1833. They brought in their version of Christianity. Methodism, Catholicism, Seventh-day Adventism, and a few other. But these were the three main churches that visited the Isles: Methodism, Catholicism, Seventh-day Adventism. And when they came in, there were two types of worship already on the island. One was paganism. This is the one that these people concentrated on. Why? Because they can write about them. They can write about the dangerous life that they were going to spend with these people, because these people were cannibals. That's what they wanted to highlight. And the third group are the Jewish. Those who retained their Jewish belief, that they brought with them from the plains of Shinar, brought with them from Jerusalem, and they brought with them from Assyria. Their Jewish religion was the one that kept them, that kept the faith. So this white man brought in this together with the story of Jesus. But you see, we've traced how corrupted the churches were. So when they came, they were not only fully converted, they were only half converted. And you expect them to come and spread the word, the true word of God. Yeah, they affected the lives of people in Fiji at that time. But the true word of God that they had to know was not with them. It was already there on the island. Those who were worshipping the true God, all they knew, they wanted was the story of Jesus, which they lacked then. They did not know of Jesus. But we do not know. During their travel up and down as traders, they would have picked up the story of Jesus and brought them back to the islands. So you see, there are so many hidden things. But why we know that there was trouble? Because of the clash of this faith, which ended up in a war. War, today they say it's a tribal war. War of cannibalism. No, it was a war of the true God that they wanted to maintain. Versus the God of the first day of the week that the Christians, the white man, brought in 1833. This is where we will end today, but I want us to start thinking of the stories that we hear about my ancestors being cannibals, when we know that they were worshippers of God. Even though some of them deteriorated into paganism, but they were worshipping the true God, which said, no other God before me. Which said, thou shalt not kill. How come they were cannibals? Which said, thou shalt not commit adultery. Do not steal. All these were the things that were written by these white Christians who came in with a new religion. Are they true, or are they exaggerating a few of the stories to make their work look much more bigger and much more adventurous? So that's where we will end today, and I hope that we will begin to link my Fijian ancestry with what's happening in the other part of the world, the spread of Christianity. We will dig much deeper into this topic next week. Let us pray.